we go. We are getting close. We're going to start seeing the end grain cutting board emerge right now. Here I have all my pieces that I just ripped into those 1 15/16 strips. And if you remember, when we first glued up these strips this way, we have a piece that's like 1 1/4 on one end. Now, I like the cutting board to have a brick-laid effect. It's more visually interesting, and it makes for a stronger board because there are no seams that are directly in line all the way across the board. So what we're going to do is start flipping these up on edge. I'm just going to flip them all up on edge. Just in the order they were sawn. Now, if I was to glue this up, it'd be an interesting board, but you can see the repetitive pattern on every single row, and it would just look like a big repetitive checkerboard. But what we're going to do is every other one we're going to flip end for end. And because we're only 1 inch at one end, or 1 1/4 inches, when we bring them back together, we get this brick-laid effect. The joints are all staggered now. So what I want to do is add even more to the kind of random pattern, and every other 2 of them I'm going to flip over the other way. So that's going to reverse the grain on the surface. So then these 2 will be the same as the first 2, and then these 2 I will flip again. So now you've really got a random pattern. It's hard to pick up the fact that these were all sawn from the same plank. It was all the same uniform plank. So we're going to line them up like this and get the clamps out, and we're just going to glue this whole grouping back up this way. So let me put another pencil mark on there. This will give us our orientation, and I'll try to get it pretty square going across. That looks good. So let's make our V, and that's it. Make one straight line. That's my glue line. I'm going to get my clamps ready. I'm going to glue this up. So we'll spin it around here and get set up. So once again, I'm going to get the glue on all these surfaces in an efficient way by just laying them flat like this. And that's it. I don't have to hit this one. It will get the glue from this one here. All right, ready to spread some glue? What's nice as I look at these is there's very little tear out here, so the surface will be nice and clean. I need my roller. And once again, the Type 1-3. All right, that's a good amount of glue. We are ready to put them back into the clamps. And we're just going to flip it up again. We want to see our arrows match. Another rub fit. Distribute that glue nicely. and align my marks. Now I'm going to put my other caul here, bring them up. Everything looks nice, pretty nicely aligned. Once again, I want to keep them flat on the beam of the clamp best I can. Feels pretty good. Snug that. The other end. That's good. All right, that's very nice. I can snug that. Now I'm going to throw a couple more over the middle just to get really good pressure here. And we should have very tight seams, which is what we want. Oops. That's good. And I'm going to steel this clamp now. That's pretty good. That's beautiful. It's awesome. I love seeing how random that looks. It's such a great effect, but so simple. That's it. So I snug these up nicely. I've got beautiful squeeze out everywhere. I know those joints are super strong. And underneath you'll see a beautiful even squeeze out. All those beads right there. And now we can set this one aside. Okay, now, once again, Julia's gonna take another one out of the oven. And this is how the cutting board looks when it comes out of those final clamps. So here we've got our brick laid pattern, our nice heavier blocks on the end there. And once again, we've got to clean this glue off and level this surface. So what I'm gonna do is scrape the glue. Then I'm going to show you my drum sander, and we'll do our final hand planing and detailing of the board. So let's go ahead and get that glue off. That's good. Okay. Now the reason I came from this direction and this direction is if I pull all the way over, I'll get tear out because the grain's vertical and I want to tear out at the end. I got one little piece here, but this board is going to be trued up and squared. So there is a margin for a little tear out at this point. Okay, so there. Looks pretty good, but not quite there yet. It's slightly uneven. So this is where I'm going to send it through the drum sander. But you would do the exact same thing I did with the hand plane. It's end grain now, so you've got to make sure you got a really sharp plane, and its low angle helps. I'm going to sand it and then actually hand plane it as well. So we'll take it over, drum sand with 80 grit, and then we'll be back at the bench. All right, we've got our board all sanded, both sides. And let me check it. Nice. It finished out at 1 7/8 inches thick. We still got a little more to take off because what you're seeing there, you can't see it probably on the video, but it's got the scratch pattern of 80 grit. Now, end grain is very difficult to sand to clear because it's the end of the tubes and they're very hard. And if I just tried to sand this with like 100 grit, 150 grit, 220, it would take quite a while to remove all those scratches. So one of the faster ways to do it is actually to skim hand plane, and I will shear off all of those scratches, those deep 80 grit scratches. Then I'm going to go right to 220 with an orbital. Greatly save time, and also you're going to see how nice hand planing can be on end grain like this. So to do this, I'll just get it back in the tail vise here with the bench dogs. Snug it up. Now for this, I'm going to use this. This is a Lie-Nielsen number 62. It's a low-angle jack plane, or it's like a number 5, like I just used that Stanley. This is really sweet plane. It's not as expensive as some of the other Lie-Nielsens because there's not as many moving parts. But you look how low that angle is. The iron or the blade is almost 3/16 of an inch thick, so it comes out at a very fine cut. Now I have this pretty well tuned up. The bottom had been waxed, and I've got a very light cut here. So I'm going to come in from the end, and what I want to do is hand plane across and just not go off the end or I'll get the tear out. By the way, before we drum sand it, I just wanted to mention, you never want to run that through a thickness planer on edge like that. You might think, oh, run it through the planer, this end grain. That would not work well because you would get massive tear out at the end as the cutting knives or whatever came out over the end. So you definitely want to sand it or hand plane it to get the best results. So here we go. All right, I just want to stop there to take a rest. Actually, to show you that what's happening. So all this dark area here, that's nicely hand planed. This lighter, cloudy is the 80 grit. So I'm going to keep planing until I see the whole thing get clear. So I've got a little more to do here. Then I'll turn around and I'll come from this direction. All right? All right, that's looking good. So, see this whole end of the board is beautifully clear. I'm seeing very nice end grain. Boy, that feels so smooth. Now I'm going to turn it around, come back this way, and get the rest of it over here. All right. That's it. The whole thing. Hand plane, clear. So the next step here will be to orbital with 220 grit. Before I can do that, I'm going to hit the other side. I'm going to strip the sides, make a cross cut to clean that up, and our edges look pretty nice. We don't have to do much there. I'm curious what we ended up with on this one. Yeah, a little over 12 3/4. We'll square up the ends here, and we'll end up with a 19-inch board in length. So I'm going to go over to the table saw, trim this uneven edge, each end, and we'll be ready for final sanding and detailing. We're back with the crosscut sled, and we're going to go ahead and skim each end. Now it's starting to feel like we have something. This is a nice, true, flat block of wood made up of all those pieces that's in. There's 90 little squares. And it's interesting how clear the edge looks. You can barely tell that that's 9 different pieces vertically there. But when you look at the face, you can see the brick laid pattern. So now what we want to do is clean up these edges quickly with a hand plane, and then we'll go ahead and get our handholds in. But let me go ahead and get this in the vise. I'm going to use a stool for this. Support it at one end. And for that, again, I can use a low angle block plane. I think I'll just use the big one again. I'm going to use it in a skewed way. Looks nice. I'm just cleaning off that table saw, those table saw markings. Use a card scraper. Final little detailing here. The other end. This surface looks good and smooth. I don't need to touch these. These have been, those were hand planed earlier when I was on the flat, so we're good there. Feels nice. again, little card scrape. That's good. So while I've got it up on edge like this, I'm going to just use the orbital and hold it as flat as I can. I want to just sand this end prior to putting the handhold in there, because sanding it after, there won't be much area to hit. At this point, we're ready to put our little handholds on the ends. But I've got to decide what's going to be the top face. This one, both surfaces look really, really nice. So it's a toss-up. I think I'll just go with this face. It looks fine. And so this will be my top. So I want my handholds down here. So what I did was I made a jig, but I had to work it out. This is my pattern on my rough stock, my sample stock that I used to create the initial pattern for the handhold. So this is the side of the board, and your fingers will come in and lift it up. When I first made it, it actually was higher than it needed to be. So in making the jig, I dropped this a touch more. Now, this whole curvature is shaped by a 7/8 inch round over bit. And I've got it in the router right now. And there it is. It's this blue 7/8 inch round over bit. So this router is set up with a guide collar. You can see that. This piece of shinier metal right here is a collar insert that inserts in this plate. You can insert different size collars depending on the kind of cutter, the size cutter you have. This is really the largest, one of the larger inserts I have, so I had to get creative, and it fits underneath this 7/8 inch cutter. So this collar will rub against the guide plate here, and the cutter will be sliding underneath it, and it will be cutting actually an 1/8 inch deeper than the cut here. So my handholds on this are 4 1/4 long, and I'm not sure how high they are, but they're going to be an 1/8 inch shorter than this one. So they go up 3/4 of an inch, and they're 4 1/4 long. So all I've got to do, I've got this guide here that indexes off the top of the board, and I want to find my center mark, and then I can attach my guide and just run my router, and it's going to create handholds very simply. So the first thing I got to do is just mark my center. And let's see, we ended up with just over 12 3/4, 6 3/8 strong. Perfect. Okay, so this is the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and I think I'll put it right in here. So I've got my jig. I just have to align the center line of my jig with this center line on my board. Get these clamps to just hold it on here. That looks good. And a clamp for the other end. That's it. My jig is centered. It's held down firmly. Now I just need to run the router. Make sure my clamps are out of the way. They are. Get my safety gear on. Here we go. That's it. Now I'm going to flip end for end and repeat. Okay, so this looks good. I have to just clean up the bottom of that because the cutter, there's a flat area that the cutter didn't totally hit. So with a sharp chisel, I can just lightly pare some of that high stuff. And then use a card scraper to smooth it out a touch more. And now with this French curve card scraper, I can get right up in there and just clean up that curve. So that I'm just going to lightly sand it. You know, this saves a lot of time in the process. You just roll it until you find it matching the curve of your molding or whatever, and then drag. And it does a nice job cleaning it up. And all that's left is a little sanding. I'm going to go ahead and route 3/8 inch round over. You could use an eighth, a quarter, whatever, or you could do it by hand. So for that, we'll get down here by the dogs again. Here's the 3/8 round over. It's the full bit, so I've got it so it's going to just come out nice and even at the top as I go around. Get my ear and eye protection, and we're ready to go. Okay, so you notice in some areas you get a little burn, have to go a little slower near the corners, so if you can go faster, fine, but you can only go so fast. So here's where a card scraper will get rid of a lot of that burn quickly, like that. So the sanding process is much easier and goes much more smoothly. This would take at least twice the amount of time if you just tried to sand it out. That's caused by there's actually a pitch or like a sap in cherry, and nothing like pine or anything, but when you slow down, that stickiness, it gets really hot and causes the surface to burn on the end grain pretty rapidly. It's accelerated by a dull router bit, so the sharper the bit, the more smoothly you move along, the less burn you'll have. All right, getting close now. The rest of that we'll sand out, but I'm going to come back to the end here, and all I've got left is some sanding, and then we'll be putting the finish on. All right, so we're ready to sand, and I've got it set up here. My orbital with 220. Need my dust collector. Here we go. Okay, I want to flip it over and do the bottom. Not as thoroughly, but now I want to final palm sand this rounded. I did a very rough go with the orbital, but the palm sander will give a softer cleanup there. Tiny bit of touch up on these corners where it's a little sharp coming up over the corner there. Blunt that a little. Nice. One thing about sanded end grain is it has this super smooth, polished feeling. Way more significant than side grain. So it's just a great surface. Now, I've had some people say that if you make a cutting board too nice, people are going to be afraid to use it. And this does have that kind of, it's almost like a work of art feel at the end. But boy, you got to use it, and it does work really well. And because it's that end grain, the surface heals up well. It's almost tempting to take a sharp knife or something and do as much as you can to hack it up a little before you give it to someone to make sure they're going to use it. So someone's got to break it in. But at this point, we're ready to apply the finish. And the best, probably the safest finish to use is a mineral oil. It's a food grade type oil. You don't want to use oils like olive and vegetable. Things like that will get rancid over time. But mineral oil is a really nice inert type of oil that we're going to use for this board. So what I want to do is apply some oil first to the bottom, and then we'll hit the top. All right, so to apply the mineral oil, I just like to put on a glove, like just a latex glove or something like that. This is a nitrile from the finishing room. And rather than brush it on, you're going to see how much this absorbs in a minute. But this kind of mineral oil you can get at a grocery store. You can also drink it for a laxative. But hopefully you're feeling good when you're doing this board, and that won't be necessary. I can't think, it's so thick, I couldn't imagine drinking it. But what all you want to do is pour it right on the surface, and the tubes are going to draw it right in. And really, this board will be so saturated you won't believe it. So it looks like I'm putting a lot of oil on there, right? I'm going to start moving it around just with my hand to get it nice and even. And this is seasoning the board. The oil is going in. It's going to prevent water from saturating this board in the future. It won't get a lot of water, but will definitely help. Now, to disinfect the board, as you use it, you should tell your whoever you're giving it to, or maybe yourself, that if you use 1 part vinegar with 4 parts water, you could make it even stronger if you wanted, and wash over the board, the vinegar will kill all the bacteria. Let it stay on there a little bit. And then when it dries, you can rinse it off. When it dries, you can always reapply a little mineral oil. But look how now it's dry on the top. All that oil went into the board. So I'm going to start putting a little more on there. I'll turn it up a little. Get it around the sides. Getting that nice cherry look. Boy, this end grain is sweet. It's dark. You see that random figure. Killed that bottle. This really goes. I mean, you can do about 2 or 3 boards with 1 bottle. So it really takes, and that's 1 pint. So you're going to need probably 6 ounces anyway to do 1 board, maybe 8. It's crazy. All right, that top is just drawing it in like straws, but this will season it up and prepare it nicely. Now, if the board starts to smell, this is I'm talking about, you can disinfect with the vinegar, like I said, but if it starts to smell, you can use regular salt or kosher salt and sprinkle it on there, and then squeeze half a lemon and just push that into the surface. Let that sit for about 5 or 10 minutes. Rinse it off, and you will have a fresh board again. And then you can always retreat with some more mineral oil like this occasionally. Totally food safe. So now I'm going to work the bottom a little, and I'm going to see that it doesn't saturate as much because it's already gone in quite a bit from the other side. And there's nowhere to go in the tubes that are vertical right here. So you just want to go until it seems to be not receiving it as much. and then you'll wipe it off. You wipe it down with a clean cloth or paper towel. This is the easiest finishing. There's no waiting. Once you wipe it down, it's ready to use. Ugh, stuck on that. Put a little more on the surface and then we'll wipe it all down. All right, now I want to clean off the oil with a nice dry paper towel. Most of it has saturated in. And seasoned this board well. Okay, now I want to flip it upside down, and the last thing we have to do is put on the feet, because you don't want this just laying straight on a countertop. It'll slide around a little bit, and it may be slightly uneven, and something may get trapped in there and scratch the countertop. So we want to put these little rubberized feet over inside the corners. That'll get it up off the counter and keep it from slipping around. I got these little feet. You can Google search rubber feet US, and you'll find the listing for where you can buy 50 of them for like $19.99, or I think it's 20 of them for $10. So that's what I'm using here. I've got little stainless steel screws. Number 6s will work best. And I want to come in from the corners. I'm coming in about 1.5. Make a little awl mark. Do that again here. There. Now once I've got those, I'm going to pre-drill for these. Making sure those screws are buried enough so they won't scratch the counter. You could also put like a beeswax mineral oil in here. Beeswax will be nice to put on as well. But check it out. That's it. Nice hand grips, beautifully seasoned. Get that brick laid effect. What a gift. I hope you enjoyed that. This video is my gift to you this Christmas, and a Merry Christmas to everyone, and a Happy New Year. And I look forward to seeing you a lot next year with plenty more videos. Thanks for joining me in the shop. See you next time.